Warning: this video contains mature content. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, Internet. Mike Bertolini here. I just want to welcome you to Three Scary Stories. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe and ring that bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Now, onto the stories.
Pass it on. It's quite an interesting concept, those little pass it on messages. I mean, chain letters and people telling you, post this in 5 different comments or else you'll die tonight. Interesting, indeed, but the idea lacks originality. It's the same story with each one. Pass it on or die. People pass it on, they go on living. A happy ending for everyone, but what if there's a little twist? Let's say that there's a photo out there. It's not one of those can't be found anywhere else type of pictures. It's actually really easy to find. Just use your chosen search engine and type in black and white photo of twins. It can be printed with a variety of different black and white photos of twins, but let me help you, tell you what to look for. You're looking for a picture of 2 twin girls wearing black dresses and white headbands. The twin on the left has a straight face, while the one on the right is smiling. Found it? Good. Now, as you'll see, there's nothing particularly unnerving about the photo. Maybe a little creepy, but other than that, it looks as normal as any other picture you ever come across. Now, here's the twist. If you do pass it on, you die. Now, I know most of you, given this particular set of choices, would choose to leave the picture be. But allow me to elaborate upon what happens when you don't pass this picture on to someone else. If you leave it alone after seeing it, you'll have nightmares. I know, bad dreams don't sound so bad when compared to the alternative, but trust me, it gets worse. It all began with something simple. Before long, you'll see the twins, standing side by side in the darkness. The girl on the left will leave, and you'll be alone with her smiling twin. And just before you wake up, she'll whisper, "Pass it on." And her smile will widen ever so slightly. I know it doesn't sound like much of a nightmare. The first of many. It's fairly subtle, but with each successive nightmare, things begin to change. Gradually, the smiling girl gets closer and closer to you. Her smile widens to impossible lengths. You won't be able to help but feel greatly disturbed and unsafe when it happens. Don't worry, that's normal. What's next, however, not so much. You'll try to wake yourself up. You'll try to move, but nothing will work. You'll find yourself trapped. She'll bring out various instruments: a knife, chains, gasoline, matches, many devices to make you feel uneasy. And you panic. You can't help but think of all the horrible things this twisted, sadistic child has in store for you. And does she ever have some horrible things in store for you? Let's take a moment to think about the possibilities. What do you think she'll do to you? Have to change around your head and pull until your skull splits? Gouge out your eyes, cut out your tongue, slice off your ears, burn you alive, knowing that you can't move? That and more, my dear. You take the term unimaginable torture too lightly until you fall asleep. If you think she'll lash you with chains, she'll do so only after she's laid them in fire and stuck railroad spikes in your back. If you think she'll burn you, she'll tear open your torso, pour gasoline into the wound, and then light the match. You'll wake up screaming. Your body will remember the pain it's endured while you quiver in fear. Every time you wake up, you'll notice subtle differences about your body. A bruise here, a scratch there, but as each nightmare gradually gets worse, so do the marks which shall be left behind. Before long, the scratches will become fresh, bloody scars. If you dreamt that you took a sledgehammer to your knee, you'll wake and rise, only to find your legs buckling below you as pain surges through your mind and kneecaps. All the while, her words linger at the back of your mind. You'll try to avoid sleeping, but it's no use. The twins make their way into your reality. They're always there. At your home, at your place of work, and at school. You would fight back, but their visage appears in place of the faces of every loved one. Eventually, you'll hide yourself away from everyone in an effort to avoid seeing these demonic children. It's all in vain, however. You'll see them in that millisecond of darkness when you blink. You'll see them in reflections and in your peripheral vision. You'll see them everywhere. You can't escape. You can consider suicide, even attempt it, but they won't let you go so easily. That shotgun that you've got hidden in the closet, the revolver in the nightstand, useless. How strange, they seem to be jammed or missing the trigger. A cocktail of cold and flu and pain medications won't help either. It's so very odd. How you just can't seem to hold them down long enough for them to take effect. Soon enough, you won't be able to distinguish your dreams from reality. You'll awake from one torturous experience only to be greeted by alternative horrors. Without realizing it, you've given the twins a new playmate, and do they ever like to play? Well, at least one does. While one plays with you, the other will stand there, watching, chanting, "Pass it on," over and over again, all the while ignoring your cries for help. There's no happy ending to be had. Should you remain optimistic, I'm afraid just as naive as those who came before you. And there were many. Oh, so many. And you won't be the last. I've made certain of that. Now, you have a decision to make. Now that you've seen the picture and discovered the consequences, whatever shall you do? Might you leave the picture be and pray this was just some sort of twisted story? Or will you decide to pass it on? Mr. Smile. It was early in November of 1997 that a series of very strange sessions led a child psychologist in Maine to contact the authorities. It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of their friends, his friend being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned. He called his friend Mr. Smile and would talk about him at great length during some sessions. The boy called him Mr. Smile both because he would always be smiling and because when he was around the boy, everything felt happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. The boy in question was being treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression, but when Mr. Smile was around, he said all the anger and the sadness seemed to just disappear. He said that Mr. Smile wouldn't speak, but rather just stand there at the foot of his bed. He smelled like candy floss, and just by being there, he made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed this imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism the boy had developed to deal with the problems at home that had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing much of it, until another patient, a girl of about 9 years old, began talking about her imaginary friend, Mr. Smile. Then a boy of 7. Then a boy of 12. And then a girl of 11. All in all, close to 15 separate patients all began to talk about Mr. Smile. The first few he'd put down to coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends, and the name and description of Mr. Smile were just generic enough that it didn't concern him too much at first. But as more and more of his patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned. He asked for more details. Every single one of them described him the same way, using the exact same words. Now, there was no way that all of these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being schooled, and according to their parents, when he spoke to them, never really even left the house, except when it was to accompany them on shopping trips and the like. There was no way that every single one of these kids could have rehearsed or prepared their statements together, which led him to a deeply disturbing conclusion. He spoke privately with each of the children's parents one at a time. He avoided disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in multiple sessions with various patients, and that he believed that there was a chance their child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss matters with the authorities, and the parents gave their consent, provided they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and talked to the children about their friend. They asked for details about his appearance, which they couldn't seem to describe apart from the smile and that he was not like them. How he got into their house, anything he said or did while he was there. Because by this point, the psychiatrist, the parents, and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure that there were no known predators living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case. But it's quite clear that whoever this Mr. Smile was, he was a real person who had been sneaking into the homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They said they would just wake up and he'd be there at the foot of their bed. Sometimes they said he would be singing something, but not in English. It sounded like a lullaby, they said. It made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put into words exactly how he looked. Each and every one of the children picked up a red crayon and proceeded to color in the entire page until it was just a rectangle of red. When asked about this, they insisted that they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms, and legs were, they would insist that they had drawn those. They claimed that they had drawn a perfect picture of the man at the foot of their bed, and when they were told that they had simply colored in the page and not drawn anything, they became deeply angry, feeling that they were being accused of lying and insisting that what they had drawn was a picture of the man they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show one of the colored-in rectangles to the various children and asked them what it was. Each and every one of them, with no knowledge of what the picture was supposed to be or who had drawn it, and with no knowledge that the other children that had been spoken to about the subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. Cameras and baby monitors were placed in the children's rooms so that they could be monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night staring at the screens that displayed where their children slept. At no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sounds except for them snoring or occasionally talking in their sleep were heard over the baby monitors. There was no sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever existed. Other psychiatrists since had put the whole thing down to some strange shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained yet, did not have any basis in reality. Some suggested that maybe this whole Mr. Smile thing had its basis in a TV show or film that the children had all watched, leading them to all dream of something similar. Then one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dead at around 2 in the morning. His mother had run to check on him, only to find his room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to run to his room. There was no possible way for him to leave, or be taken, and be out of her sight in the time it took her to leave her bedroom, run towards his, but he was gone. She said there was a smell like cotton candy in the room. The search for the boy turned up nothing. No one had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before or during the disappearance, and no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who had spoken of Mr. Smile vanished as well. Then another of the boys. One by one, each of them began to disappear, until only 4 remained. The 4 remaining children began to talk about how Mr. Smile and his friends were going to take them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived with the other smiling men in his happy place, and that he would take them there soon. He said that there were lots of people there already, and that in the happy place everything was beautiful. He said that they knew about it because Mr. Smile talked to them in their heads of the place they were going. Things began to get increasingly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining of headaches and nausea. Their schools reported that they had begun to suffer hallucinations, and 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that Mr. Smile was showing them anymore. One began screaming for half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit and screaming for the colors to stop, that the colors were horrible, that they needed them to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their heads all the time now and was telling them things, terrible things, but that they couldn't talk about it, that they mustn't, because then their parents would know about the terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked them to write down what Mr. Smile was saying, promising that he would show it to no one, managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed. The contents of the book are known only to him and the authorities, but whenever anyone involved has been asked about it, they just get real quiet and quickly find an excuse to change the subject. The children stopped sleeping. Footage from the security camera showed them sitting bolt upright, their eyes unblinking, just staring at the wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives did nothing. One of the girls began cutting strange circular marks into her skin, while two of the boys ceased communicating in English altogether. The language they spoke was never identified, and despite numerous people having been asked to listen to them, they could not translate what they were saying. By the start of 1999, all four of the children had vanished into thin air. There was no trace of who took them. Searches have turned up nothing to this day, with no indication of where they are or if they're even dead or alive. No suspects have ever been found either. All four of them appear to simply vanish into thin air, much like the others, all of whom are also remain missing, their disappearances unexplained. Please stay awake. Dark, cold, and eerie. Those are the only words I can come up with to describe the house in which I had lived with my family for the majority of my life. Mostly dark, blistering cold during the winter, and always eerie. Sometimes there would be strange noises coming from the cellar, too. It had often given me the creeps, though I would never admit that to my mother. I figured I was too old to let some silly noises scare me. I had been trying to act like the man of the house ever since my dad left when I was 7, and I always hoped I would never turn out like my father, whom I hated with a burning passion. As far as he goes, I suppose I better just leave it at that. I lived in the house with my mother, Linda, and my uncle, Kevin, on a vast piece of land in Steinen, Indiana. Steinen was a tiny piece of shit in the middle of nowhere. Nobody liked living there. I didn't have any friends because I was homeschooled, and I'd never even seen another kid my age in Steinen, since we almost never left the house, unless my mom had to go to town to buy groceries. However, I was always very close to Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he would tell me ghost stories right before bed, which my mother hated. "Stop it, Kev. You're going to give him nightmares," she would snap. Oh, I did get nightmares. Indeed. And sometimes it seemed as though the nightmares refused to end. They crept into the back of my mind like a spider crafting its web. The story he told most often was about a monster with a contorted body and black eyes. According to the legend, as Uncle Kevin called it, even though I knew he made it up himself, the monster would come into your room if you were awake past your bedtime and hide in your closet, watching you the whole night. Of course, this was just a silly little tale that Kevin would tell me so I wouldn't stay up late. Even so, I can't tell you how many times that horrible creature has popped into my head over the years. On this particular night, I decided to go to bed in an attempt to sleep off a pounding headache. I lied down on my icy bed and sank underneath the covers, hiding my face from whatever may have been lurking inside of my head. After setting my glasses down on the nightstand beside my bed, I reached over and flicked the light off. The darkness made me feel alive in a very strange way, almost as though I was mesmerized by the nothingness. As I looked around the room, seeing almost nothing but the pitch-black darkness surrounding me, I felt entranced, as if something was forcing me to look. Of course, there was nothing to look at least not with the eyes. There was something you could only witness within the deepest corridors of your mind, the part of your mind that always dread visiting and can never seem to return from. Out of nowhere, I began to hear scratches upon the window above my head. My eyes immediately burst open, and I felt like I was unable to close them again. What the fuck was that? I asked myself. Nothing, of course. It was nothing. It couldn't have been anything, right? Right? Just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. No big deal. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to peer out the window, just to make sure I was hearing nothing more than a tree branch brushing against the glass. But then it hit me like a bag of bricks. There was no tree next to my window. Still, I decided it would be better to sleep it off and think more about it in the morning. It's probably all in my head. had to be. I found it unusually difficult to fall asleep that night, as if somebody or something was trying to keep me up. I woke up the next morning with that sound still locked in my brain. It had to have been coming from somewhere, but where? Shit, I had no idea. But then I remembered. The cellar. I built up as much courage as I could muster and slowly crept down into the abyss. Jesus, I hadn't been down there in a year, maybe longer. I'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of cobwebs and stacks of cardboard boxes shoved against the walls. I rustled through a couple of boxes until I stumbled upon a picture I'd drawn when I was a child. It was a sketch of a grotesque creature. It definitely wasn't human. This thing barely even had a face, just dark black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and thin, and was contorted into a shape that I had never even seen before. The more I looked at the drawing, the more I was reminded of that story my uncle used to tell me. It appeared to be raining above the creature, and towards the bottom of the paper I had scribbled, "Please stay awake," in giant letters. I didn't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but I folded up the paper and stuffed it in my pocket. I quickly made my way up the staircase into the kitchen and went about my day as usual, keeping the drawing in my mind, trying to remember what it meant and why I'd drawn it in the first place. I looked outside and noticed that it had begun to rain. I didn't want to think about that creature any longer, so I walked into my dimly lit room and plopped onto my bed. I fell asleep before I even knew it. When I awoke, it was exactly 3 a.m. The night was colder and darker than usual. The farm was soaked with rain from earlier in the evening. The moon was full and radiant. It almost didn't look real. For an instant, I glanced out of my bedroom window and I could swear I saw something walking quickly through the yard. When it spotted me, it slunk behind a tree, as if it were trying to hide from me. It looked exactly like what I had drawn when I was a child. I ran into Uncle Kevin's room and began shaking him awake. "Kevin! Kevin!" He rubbed his eyes.
"What's up, bud? It's late."
He asked, bewildered at my excitement. I looked him in the bloodshot eyes and softly said, "I saw someone in the yard." Kevin looked at me with hesitation.
"No, you probably just saw an animal. Get back to bed."
I know what I saw. This was no animal, or at least not one that I'd ever seen, not even in my worst fucking nightmares. I knew I couldn't tell him exactly what I had seen, as he would never believe me. "No, Kevin, it was not an animal. Please, it was a man. I think. Look, just please go out and check." Uncle Kevin leapt up and grabbed his shotgun from under the bed.
"All right, come on. Show me where he is. I'll try not to wake your mom. I'll scare the fucker off."
We went outside and I pointed to the tree. I whispered to Kevin, "I saw him go behind that tree." My uncle bravely walked up to the tree and peered around it. Nothing. He searched the entire farm for well over half an hour, but he never found anyone or anything.
"Let's go back in, bud. There's no one out here. Keep the doors locked tonight."
He was wrong. I knew there was something out there. I crawled into bed and threw the covers over my face. I could hear the blistering wind coming from outside. It pierced my ears with a whistle that I thought only dogs could detect. Suddenly, I heard a tapping sound upon my window. The sound grew louder with each tap. I tightened the blankets around my body. The taps slowly turned into knocks. Louder and faster the knocks became. The knocks turned into bangs. I thought the glass was going to break. And out of nowhere, it stopped. No more taps, no more knocks, no more bangs. No more wind. I was relieved. Suddenly, I heard a low, chilling voice in my ear. "Please stay awake." It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. I ran into the hallway, ready to make my way to my mother's room, when I saw it. Whatever it was, I still don't know. It was holding Kevin's lifeless, mangled body in its arm. Carved deeply into my uncle's torso were the words, "Please stay awake." I tried to let out a scream, but only silence filled the dead air. I sprinted through the door of my mother's bedroom and saw her body lying in the middle of the floor. She was covered in blood, and her left arm had been ripped straight out of its socket. Written next to her in her own blood were the words, "Please stay awake." I began to sob, and when I turned around, the creature was gone. I don't know where the hell it went. I'm not sure I want to. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lied down on the cold, now blood-soaked floor, waiting for them to arrive. It felt like hours. Finally, the police showed up to find me in the fetal position next to my mother's corpse. I told them everything I saw. I showed them my drawing, told them about the taps, the knocks, the bangs. I told them what I'd seen outside. But of course, they wouldn't hear a word of it. Why would they? All they could see was a lonely kid hovering over his dead mother, her blood covering my clothes almost as much as it covered the floor. It's cold in the cell. It's dark and lonely. The silence is the only saving grace. Constant, peaceful silence. Tonight it's raining outside. It's colder, darker, and wetter than ever. But, unfortunately, I must stop writing now. I just heard a tap on my window.
Thanks for watching. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.